All right, we're here at my VermiHut indoor worm bin, and today we are going to start 2 experiments and we're going to check on how the bin has been doing since we were in here last time and we rotated. So the first experiment we're going to try is putting in some different variations of shrimp shells, and then we're also going to do a little fun experiment at the end with some eggshell grit. So I'm just going to kind of take this newspaper off, get this worm off right here, or 2 worms, or 3 worms. Take this off because it is actually going to be part of our experiment. So last time we were in here, like I said, we rotated and we put the old inoculating tray up here, and then we fed it. And some of the stuff we fed it was this apple core, some watermelon, toast with some watermelon on top of it, some sprouts, broccoli, some lettuce stalks, and some strawberries. So we are going to go ahead and check and see how all that is doing. Now it's been 11 days, so a little bit shorter than I had been checking on before, and check it out. Lots of worms up here, and there were some in here when we rotated this tray up, but I think the food has got the rest of the worms to mostly come up here, so I'm pretty excited about that. I want to see how that watermelon and bread combo kind of did, and I think this is where one piece of watermelon was, and I'm not finding too much of anything there. And let's see under here. This is probably where that bread would have been, and I'm not really seeing it. Oh, yep, here we go. I think this right here is possibly some of that bread. In fact, I think it is. I almost thought maybe it was an avocado shell, but right inside here, I can kind of see like what I recognize as bread. So very cool. And check out all these worms up here. This is fantastic. Let's go over here and see if there's any other food, and I'm not seeing any. So after 11 days, they really came up here and devoured it. I think this is also some of that bread. Now the bread went in as toast and it was really dry, which is why we put the watermelon on top, and I think that helped to do the trick. But certainly they are enjoying it, but it is also a slow food, as is this apple. I put it in, just sliced it in half and put it in, and it is clearly also a slow food. When I chop them up a little bit smaller, they tend to go faster, but here's some evidence right here. Apples are slow foods. So let me kind of mix everything around and then we'll set up for our next feeding. So while we were aerating, I found some of our older long-term food, and here's a mango seed, and it looks like they've eaten everything inside of it and just kind of deposited castings, just a couple worms in there. But we'll put that in the bottom. Looks like we have a banana stalk from probably the previous tray that we just dumped in here. We've got our apple and then all that bread and worms that we're finding right there. So we'll leave those on the bottom. One of the things that I also noticed is that there are no sprouts in here. We put in some broccoli sprouts that we grow for our salads, and no sign of those at all. So let's go ahead and add our bedding and start with our feeding. So in order to continue to bulk this up and to give them a good base of bedding, I'm going to put in some of this shredded cardboard, and it's important to add bedding with every single feeding. They'll eat both the bedding and the food, and the bedding also helps to keep the bin from getting too moist and prevent you from overfeeding. So let's start with what we're going to feed them, and then we'll add our experiment to it. So all this food was previously frozen, and then I kind of left it on the counter to thaw out a little bit. So we've got some lettuce and some watermelon. We've got some avocado pits. I'll put one upside down and one right side up, and in one a little piece of onion. Looks like we've got a nectarine or peach right there, some strawberry tops, some more watermelon, and I think that's it. There's a little bit of juice from, it thawing out, and I'll just kind of add that as well. Now we've got 2 trays of dry bedding underneath this as the inoculating trays, so I'm not worried about that liquid going all the way down into the basin. Before I get started with the experiments, I'm just going to kind of wipe my hand, and I will just put this in here as well, and I don't think that'll be a problem for them. They should eat that up as well. It's just a soiled napkin, or I'm sorry, soiled paper towel that they'll use as bedding as well. So here we go. Right here is just some shrimp shells that I ate all the shrimp out of, and I tried to pull as much meat out of the tail as possible, and then I just throw them in the freezer. They're going to kind of be the control, and I'm just going to put them right here on this side. And these were my attempt to dry them out a little bit. I put it in my toaster oven, and unfortunately I put it on air fry. So very quickly they burnt and got kind of crumbly. So our house is just a little stinky right now. And finally I got smart and took Peggy Helbling's advice, and I put them on low heat, and these are just a little bit more crumbly, but they aren't burnt. So I'm going to put those right there. So besides Peggy, I think Sandra over at Nana's Worms and Garden has also done experiment with prawns, and they went pretty quick. I think she said it went about 2 to 3 weeks, and the worms ate all the shells. And I think Ann over at Plant Obsessed has done the same. So I usually keep everything I put into here to mostly plant material or, my eggshell grit, but I'm going to make an exception for the shrimp tails because they're minerals. And even if there is a little bit of shrimp in there, I'm going to bury this thing up so it's not going to stink whatsoever. And I know the worms will love what's inside. So that worm chow was just some expired grains from my pantry. And now we're putting in some coffee grounds, some used coffee grounds that will go great in my garden after the worms have totally consumed them. And I'm just going to take this little bunch that's kind of in a clump here. It's got some mold in it. And I'm just going to spread it out just a little bit right there. So normally I put eggshell grit on next, but I'm going to save that for another experiment on top. So over here, we've got kind of our control, just some frozen shrimp shells. And I'm hoping, the different areas that I put them in aren't going to affect how we're doing it, because I know worms love strawberries, but they each have some juicy stuff to attract them. So I'm going to bury it up. And then what we're going to do next is we're going to take that newspaper that was on here originally. And if you've been watching some of AV's video lately, he has been putting worm chow over his newspapers that are on top of the surface of his bins, and the worms have been eating the worm chow right on top of the newspaper and consuming the newspaper as well. One of his latest videos, he did that with kind of shredded peanut shells, and the worms ate the peanut shells but not the paper. So I want to see what they do with the eggshells, because we've done experiments in here before and put like a clump of eggshells, and within 12 hours the worms had almost devoured the whole pile of eggshells. So let's see if they'll do that same thing on top of the newspaper. So in goes our newspaper right here, and let's just kind of arrange it real nice. And then here are our eggshells. Just going to kind of put them on top in a few rows, and we'll see if the worms come up on top. Now this newspaper, because this VermiHut has a lid on it, the newspaper tends to stay moist. So I am hopeful that with the moist newspaper and the fact that I've seen worms really attack eggshells, that we'll get some interesting results in here. So this is cool. On our next VermiHut video, we'll be able to check out 2 experiments and see how they've done. So I hope you're having a great day. I hope your worm bins are doing fantastic. So happy vermicomposting, everybody. Take care now.